Welcome to the Trad Dads podcast, where we examine cultural and political issues through the lens of traditional thought.
All right, welcome to another episode. This is Levi Russell, and I have Levi Breederland on the line with me. And today, what we're going to talk about is guys' participation in the pro-life movement. And this is an interesting topic because Levi was recently participated in a pro-life march with his wife and some other folks. So, Levi, can you tell us about the event and where it was, or what was the whole point of the event, that sort of thing?
Yeah, so usually I think it's like the first Thursday or second Thursday in May every year. There's a march called the March for Life that happens at the capital of Canada in Ottawa, and then in more recent years, there's been kind of little offshoot marches that have happened at the different provincial legislatures. So living in Edmonton, we are just down the street from the headquarters of the province here. And so yeah, we've got the place to, like, if we want to do a march for a purpose, this is the place to do it. So I think this is the 14th year it's happened here in Edmonton. And it's a bunch of people that get together, and we've got signs, and we have a couple speeches at the legislature buildings. Like, it's all a legally sanctioned event. The police close down the roads for us, and we do a little couple kilometers through downtown Edmonton and hold up traffic and make people honk at us, and then make our way back to the capital. And yeah, so it was kind of a 3-hour little afternoon adventure. It's my third time, I think, or fourth time going, but first time with the family, so that made it a more interesting event. And the kids found it fun to get to walk in the streets and hold up signs that they couldn't read and that kind of thing.
Yeah, so you had the whole crew there, huh?
Yeah, my wife had the baby in the carrier, and the 2-year-old was sleeping in the wagon, and 5-year-old had a great time walking with her friends.
Nice. So then, how many people do you know roughly? How many people were at that particular one? And so, I mean, this isn't the whole nationwide Canadian one; it's just the one in Edmonton, Alberta. There.
Yeah, I was talking with a friend of mine who works for the Catholic Archdiocese's like news department, and he said they had estimated about 1,500, which is impressive. Like, there was a lot of people there, but to actually know the number.
Yeah, that's good. So, were there any kind of counter protesters or anything like that, or was it mainly just the people honking at you in the intersection?
Well, so last year there was a couple women on the side that had dressed up as handmaidens, based on that character from that one story that's recently been made into a TV show,
The Handmaid's Tale, right?
Yeah. So yeah, the red, it's like a red kind of one piece dress, like a full body dress, and then a white bonnet type hat. And they were just they were pretty peaceful. Like, they just stood off to the side, and they had a couple signs that had like the kind of common pro-choice slogans.
Yeah, they stood there and act like you were oppressing them.
Yeah, like they didn't really do anything. So that was last year. This year, they were back. I recognized a couple faces. But at the beginning, when we had our first, like, our opening speeches and we sang the national anthem, there was also a group of people that were of a very noticeable demographic. They all had similar style of clothing, and they were all, millennials, to use the buzzword. And they had everything about their brand, so to speak, was very dark. They had inverted pentagrams on their signage and whatnot. And afterwards, poking around on the social media, I think it was a group of Satanists had agreed to partner with the handmaidens and show up. So they were more intrusive this time around. They were chanting "my body," or they were chanting "their body, their choice" was the phrase they were chanting.
I see.
And they shouted a couple times. But then when we actually went on the march, they kind of it looked like they hung back at the legislature buildings, because they were there when we got back, but they weren't like in the march itself.
Right. Okay.
And when we got back, they had air horns and little noisemakers and stuff, and they were just kind of like, they were just being a nuisance, basically. Like they didn't really make much of a dent other than being a nuisance.
Right. Okay. So yeah, I'm sure. So you kind of mentioned some of the chants they were doing, and yeah, we usually hear, sort of, if you're a guy, you don't have any right to talk about this kind of stuff, or your opinion doesn't matter, and all that sort of thing. So
yeah, they had signs. One of the signs said like, "Why are we following rules?" And that kind of thing. Like, if you don't have a uterus, you shouldn't be able to make rules regarding people who do have uteruses. That kind of like the usual, like you're not able to conceive, so stop trying to prevent people from doing what they want to do with their own body. Kind of
right.
Lame arguments. All their signage and all their arguments was like the easiest arguments to vote down. Like,
right.
Like none of them said things like there's times where the women would need to be able to abort. It was all like really dumb arguments.
Yeah. So I mean, outside of sort of like discussions on the internet or maybe debates or whatever, where you might see, guys involved, especially if they're, bioethicists or doctors or something like that. I mean, maybe the first image you get, at least for me, when I think of a pro-life march is not like a bunch of dads. You know what I mean? Because I did a couple demonstrations in college for this kind of thing with our parish, but it was different. I was single, whatever. I mean, just, young single people demonstrating for stuff. I mean, that's no big deal. That happens all the time. But, we're talking about like a 30-year-old guy, with kids and stuff like that. Why is he taking time out of his day for, this kind of thing? But so like what, how do you see your role in this kind of thing? Is it something to do with, being a model for your kids, or is it just something you think is important in general as a Catholic, or how does that work?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like at the march, there was, it was a noticeable amount of young people, because several of the local Christian schools had groups that had wanted to come, and there was a noticeable amount of older people, like retirees, who would be able to go because they didn't have a job to go to, and a noticeable amount of mothers and young kids. But if you were really like counting the demographics, there was quite a few people who were dads there. Lots of full families with the father there, and lots of people who were, like not the typical one who would have that kind of interest, you would think. So I found that very encouraging, because for me, at least, it's one of those things like, no, I don't have the female reproductive system, but as a man, I'm still part of the process of creating a baby and also raising a kid. So to like all those tropes of not having a say, it's like, well, that's kind of garbage. And then just to think like, it's not an argument of telling a woman what to do with her body. It's an argument of saying, this is an independent body that has rights to life just like any other body. They need as much as much help as they can get, because they can't argue for their position.
Right. It's almost as stupid as like, well, you've never murdered anyone, so you shouldn't be able to talk about murder. What? Like, that doesn't make any sense.
One argument I heard was, you don't own a gun. Like, this was a a pro-life argument. It was that you don't own a gun, so you shouldn't be able to tell gun owners what they can do with their guns. I was like, yeah, there you go.
Right. It's just sort of like a showing them how absurd their argument is or
Yeah.
whatever kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like we definitely, as men, we definitely have a part to play in the conception of a child, and we definitely have a part to play in the raising of a child.
Right.
So why can't we have a part to play in protecting the ones that otherwise wouldn't be protected, because we have no laws to prevent that from happening?
Right. Well, and that's the thing too, is, I mean, you know, a lot of us have daughters. I have one, and I think you have 3. Is that right?
Two.
Or two. Okay. So, you know, I mean, obviously I'm concerned, even if it wasn't a guy thing. I mean, just, you know, stipulate that point. Okay, fine. I have an interest in my daughter's life, and I have an interest in the society that she grows up in. And I don't want her growing up in a place where, you know, people think, you know, killing their own children is, you know, something to do.
Yeah. A while ago, a friend of mine who has a vlog, he did a video about how he said, like, the term pro-choice doesn't really encompass everything well enough. And he said, if you want to call yourself pro-choice, that means you should be willing to accept the responsibilities of the choices you make. And therefore, you know, if you make a choice to do something that could cause an unwanted pregnancy, then you should take responsibility for that. And I think that's, as a parent, that's one of those things, is like, teach your kids to make wise choices and show them, you know, give them a good example of how wise choices are made, and avoiding situations where bad choices could be made just in general.
Sure.
And then specifically in the pro-life situations, like, yeah, let's raise our kids so that they realize the complexity of how this all is, and yeah, the sanctity of the life that can be created so easily.
Right. Well, and also I think, you know, some people, you know, you hear people talk about, you know, oh, these protesters brought their kids, you know, they're exploiting their children, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, yeah, I mean, I kind of get that, but not really, because I mean, it more than anything, you're just teaching your kid by example how important the issue is. You know,
Yeah.
so
Here they have there's a lot of bad press about the people who bring their kids, and then also the schools that send busloads of kids, saying like, oh, we've got schools sending loads of kids, and they're using our taxpayer money, and they're not even doing school, and they're probably just calling it a social studies field trip.
Right.
So
right.
it's like, but like, we have here in this province, we have the Catholic school system, which is run by the province and funded by the province, and it's basically grandfathered in to get full funding. And I find it encouraging that the schools are wanting to show the kids that, yes, this is an important thing, important enough that we will, you know, miss a couple classes and, you know, have an educational trip, and then also show our encouragement for everyone else who's marching.
Right. Well, you know, and that actually brings up another interesting recent event back in January, I think, with, you know, our March for Life here in the U.S. in D.C.
Oh, yeah.
With the Catholic high school kids, Covington Catholic high school kids, you know, marching for, you know, their school, and they were, you know, perhaps unfortunately, I guess, in a way, wearing their Make America Great Again Trump hats. And they just had this random guy just beat the drum in their face, and then there was this huge media firestorm over it. And now I think one of the families is suing like at least 2 major news outlets for $250 million.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that turns out, because
Yeah.
there was definitely some inaccurate reporting and conclusions that were drawn too soon in the reporting side of things.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, that kind of makes me think of another reason. It's like, well, okay, why would you want guys at these types of events? And it's like, well, sometimes the counter protesters are, crazy attention-seeking lunatics who want to bang drums in front of children's faces, and it's like, maybe you need to have some men around just for the normal reason you would ever want men around. It's because they're larger and stronger and tougher than women on average, and so you would just kind of need some muscle there to defend, even if the bulk of the marchers are women, there's always going to be some, crazy lunatic that might, try to threaten violence or do something stupid.
Yeah. And also just like if it was just, if my wife had said like, hey, I want to go to this march, this rally for, whatever situation. And if I agreed with her opinion on the topic, then, and in an event like a march, like it's the numbers that count, because that's what shows like the people looking out of the office buildings as we walk by, it shows them the amount of support to see 1,500 people walk by. Right. And so even if it wasn't something I was passionate about and my wife was going to a similar type of event for whatever purpose, I would consider tagging along if I could justify, not working for the afternoon or that kind of thing.
Right.
Because it is, in this situation, at least, it is a numbers thing, and I don't disagree with it. So, I might as well. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I could see where there would be stuff that's just, the kids shouldn't be there. So, somebody's got to watch the kids or that kind of thing. But yeah, no, that makes total sense. I don't think we've ever, since I've been married, I don't think we've ever done anything like this sort of thing. I don't think we've ever gone and done some kind of protest, but, we've not really lived in places where there's lots of protests that are friendly to our point of view, let's say. Plenty of protests, but they're I can remember the University of Georgia campus after Trump got elected, and it wasn't nearly as bad as a lot of these campuses, but there were a few dozen students standing around yelling. But yeah, I mean, I think that's cool that you guys have that kind of thing in your capital city there, and that you are jumping in and supporting and all that. So I think we'll tie it up there. And was there anything else you wanted to say about it, Levi?
No, I think we covered the key points there.
Sounds good. Thanks, man.
Thanks for listening to the Trad Dads podcast. If you enjoyed our show, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app and consider giving us a 5-star rating on iTunes. It really helps us out.
The podcast you just heard was made using Anchor. Ever thought about making your own podcast? Anchor makes it really easy for anyone to get started. It's a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing podcasts. Best of all, it's 100% free. Sign up now at anchor.fm/new. That's anchor.fm/new to get started.